Thanks, Kenny. As most know, we had our athletic board meeting this morning, and we had a great update on a variety of things, and what was turned out to be a great year. Obviously, before the COVID hit, and we got to talk about all those topics. But we did have a finance and a budget meeting, and updated on that coming out of fiscal year 20, which ends, or you're running into the end of the fiscal year 20, which is June 30th. Still on track for a surplus of around 4 million plus for this year, which we're definitely going to need for next year with the challenges that we foresee coming in fiscal year 21. We updated on the personnel committee meeting that happened last month, where we reviewed myself, as well as we talked about the associated reviews. Gave some highlights on the academic performance, community service, all the same things that where we're really having a great year in many ways, and as well as in competition. And it's unfortunate that the year is coming to a close the way it is today with all that's going on and with COVID. But we updated on the fiscal year budget next year, got approval on that. I think this is like no other year I think I've ever entered, knowing that the budget won't look anything like what the projection looks like very soon. We'll have different forecasts coming about during the year. It's hard to tell what's going to occur here when we get into the year, but we've tried to take a number of things into account, and then depending on how well we're able to mitigate the COVID virus and resocialization plays out over particularly the next 60 days, I think that'll dictate how our budget's going to look. We only have so many levers here to pull, and on the revenue side, certainly football and basketball ticket revenue are a couple of them. We spent some time going over the return to campus plan. Dr. Pat Ivey, our associate AD of student health and performance, covered off on frankly, the planning and all the planning went into it, and how well it's going. So far so good. Knock on wood, it's gone perfectly for us. Student athletes giving us feedback, has been helpful. I think as we're going into phase two, starting on Monday, we have phase two kicking in with the next group of student athletes, and then going from there, we'll continue to adjust on that. But so far so good. Having been over at the football complex, the staff are wearing their mask like they should, adhering to cleaning. There's a lot of cleaning going on. But more importantly, the athletes are having a great time, and they're happy to be back. And I think that they feel safe, which is what we want to hear. And, we're getting back into conditioning and so forth, which I know they're excited about. But, when you sit in this office every day and there's nobody in the building, it feels a little bit like the movie The Shining in terms of being alone over here. And when you go over to the football complex and have the athletes really get excited to see you and get to see their emotions and excitement, it's really uplifting. It really is. I think for all the staff involved, we're really happy to have them back. The second thing we covered off on outside of the normal agenda was, what's going on in our diversity, equity, and inclusion inside the department, and obviously reference the community and what's going on across the globe as much as in the U.S. and things that the way we've been going about this leading up to what's occurred here locally, and kind of going forward, just how you modify your plans and how we play a role in this, and we went into some specifics on that. But certainly made our board aware and challenged them to get on board with us, and we'll have their back, they have ours. And then, we took a quick look ahead. There was a question about, which I'm sure there'll be some here, about football and fall sports, even into basketball in terms of fan engagement. And there's still, I think our focus is still on, primary focus is still on when practice starts. And with the football oversight committee meeting last night, there'll be more coming from that will, I'm sure, flip the switch somewhat on some of our plans and dates. And we're prepared to do that. But it also, I think, is an indication of that football is going to start, hopefully start on time. And I think that's what we're all planning for. But What that means in terms of fans is still yet to be determined. I think you can see that we have contingency plans going on. We've communicated some of that to our fans, our season ticket holders, and that's the reason we've held off on single game tickets and mini game packs and all that, is to, let's sort out where we are on season tickets first. The deadline is Monday. I'm sure there'll be some lag in that, and then we'll kind of go from there. But we do have other procedural things we're looking at in parallel to make sure it's a safe environment. I think fans are aware that there'll be some at risk, at will on their side, but we want to mitigate that risk and make them feel as comfortable as they can entering the venue when we're allowed to do so. And certainly that's not solely up to us, as I've said before, that there's government officials and health officials who will help make that decision more than it will be what we do. We just adjust to what comes out and deal with it. But we certainly are looking at all avenues, and there's a lot of information being shared amongst the different colleges and universities on their plans, and we're sharing our insight. But a lot to tackle. We got so many initiatives going on right now in the athletic department. It's certainly many of them hard to perceive, but we're dealing with them very well as a team. With that, I'll shift over to some questions, Kenny.
Yes,
Vince,
if you have
Russ
questions,
Brown,
please. Go ahead.
Russ Brown with Kentucky Today, Vince. It looks like the NCAA is going to extend the football preseason. I just wondered what your reaction is to that.
Yeah, I think that's, we expected it to be extended. We weren't sure how far, whether it was going to be 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I think that's the thing we've been preparing for. I think the coaches have to think about that as well, because they, Coach Satterfield and his staff they have a calendar that they look at well in advance. I mean, they talk about their annual calendar, and it really is down to the day. So I think that's the thing they've been looking at, is how do they adjust that calendar to having, frankly, more practice time, more. So I think that's where we're trying to, weigh in on what they can do, how much more time they're going to spend on film and things like that before they get into physical contact.
Follow up to that, do you know when they're thinking about allowing physical contact? I think the walkthrough and meeting, so forth, is supposed to be around July 24th. But
yeah, they haven't let that out. The football oversight met last night. I know there was a lot of discussion around those topics in terms of, the number of countable hours that they can have on with coach instruction, and then actually getting into practice with contact. But there's not been a formal release to us. I've certainly got some informal stuff, but I'm afraid to mislead you if I let out what I know at this point. I think that we're going to see something though here in the coming days. Boy, everybody must be on golf.
It's Cameron with the Courier Journal. Kind of going back to the budget, I said you can go through a lot of hypotheticals with this, and I imagine you guys have backup plans put in place for a lot of this stuff. But let's just to say, like, the fan capacity is cut back substantially. Maybe you don't even have fans. How much of that was planned into the budget, and if so, what is kind of a backup plan that you guys might have for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speculate too much, even though we're looking at it, Cameron. But keep in mind, when we start our football revenue budget, we don't anticipate sellouts. I mean, I think that's the thing is, we look at how many season tickets we've had, what single game tickets look like, who's on the, schedule. We can do a lot of comparisons, right? Because we can look and see, what Kentucky game means to us historically, what it might mean this year. And then, as you know, we backed off from there, and we backed off on a variety of things, including even in our premium areas, we backed off in, suites and seat donations. But, it was over $6 million we backed out of that football revenue plan for this year. And I think we just kind of look at it as though, where you get into all the variables at the game is, are you going to be able to accommodate suites? better than you can premium seats, better than you can the bowl, or is it just the opposite? And I think that all those nuances come into play. Our suites do not all have their bathrooms in there, right? So that's certainly something you got to think about. So how many portalettes would you have, and where would you put them? If they want to have, and making sure you have the right number of cleaning people on site, whether they're in the restrooms or around the concession stands. There's so many things to think about on that front to make sure it's a safe environment, because even if we say, okay, it's 50 or it's 70 or whatever the capacity might be, those individuals who purchase tickets got to feel comfortable coming. As you know, we have tickets sold and then actual attendance doesn't always match up. But I don't know. I'd like to think on our initial run we were pretty thoughtful about it, but there's certainly other scenarios we've run, and if there weren't fans, that's pretty dramatic, and we certainly our operating expenses go down too, because we employ a lot of people to take care of fans and get them to their seats and deal with them at the gates. I mean, there is a variable expense to running a game that goes away if there weren't fans, but you still do have fixed cost, meaning coaching staff cost and student athlete, financial aid and all those things. Those are harder to adjust. So you got to look at other levers to pull back your costs.
And kind of off that, you guys had that $4 million surplus. How much of that, just knowing you have that, does that give you some sort of kind of affirmation of kind of all the cuts, getting ahead of it so early? So I imagine that's probably a bright spot for you guys, you think?
Yeah, it added to it, but I would say that we were already on pace for a great year. If anything, it would have been, we thought it was going to be higher than that. As you guys, distribution wasn't what it would typically be, which means so is the ACC distribution. But, our team was doing a great job. We came out of basketball with solid revenue, football with solid revenue, royalty in terms of product sales, and we created a lot of excitement in our brand. A lot of excitement with the Dunking Bird. We were hitting on all cylinders. Corporate support's been terrific through our multimedia rights partner Learfield, and then just general fundraising. It was we weren't certainly feeling full comfort, but we were having a great year. But we already knew we had a more challenging year next year than we did this year, and I think that we were hoping to end with a nice surplus, but we were hoping to be greater than what we're even having.
Vince, Russ again. Has there been a downturn in season ticket requests?
Yeah, right. Right now we're in I'll say a good spot. Monday's the deadline, and as I was talking with Jeff Spelker, our head of finance yesterday, it's amazing how many renewals and checks came flying in through the lockbox in the last week. Specifically yesterday, and we knew today was going to be another a good mail day, because not everybody does it online, like you would think. So that's why there's a lag. So I think this time next week we're going to have a better view of things, but we're tracking nicely. It jumped significantly, though, I would tell you, in the last 7 to 10 days in terms of renewals, where all of a sudden with that renewal date, people are lagging. I think part of it is, I may be reading too much into it. I think part of it is just what's happening in society. I think part of it is people have gotten comfortable. The cases haven't spiked like I think some thought. Restaurants are opening to 50%. Some states are heading towards 100. And I just think people are getting some comfort level around what's happening here and understand the risk better. And maybe that's why they're leaning in on renewal of the tickets. But I'd love to see us get north of 30,000, get into that, maybe even in 35,000 range, but on season tickets. But we'll see. That number will come in the next week or so.
What was the number this past year? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's around 40,000 has been our season ticket holders. And, as you can tell by what I'm telling you, I didn't expect us to be at 40 based upon COVID. We backed off on season tickets. So we're tracking in on about what we forecasted. It's just a question of whether the capacity is going to avail us that.
Vince, this is Aaron Matus with WDRB. That operating cost, how much of a variable can that be? Obviously, you said it goes away, with no fans. But if we are at some decent capacity, are you guys, I guess, building in extra, I don't know if it's sanitizer or wipes or more people on hand, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we've had to think about supplies. Obviously, hand sanitizer is one. Whether we have sprayers, to take care of some areas, just like we're doing in the strength conditioning areas. We're in there spraying down the equipment in there too. So, additional portalets, as I mentioned. I mean, I know it sounds like a silly one, but that is something. I think where and how you queue up the fans. If you're gonna take temperature readings before they go in, do you do that as they're getting their ticket scanned and the metal detector, or do you do that in a separate area to avoid additional queuing up and slowing down of entry? Number of gates means more personnel. You got more gates to try to give access to the facility. That's going to be even more personnel. So there's definitely incremental expense to no matter how many fans we have in there. And I just think we got to gauge that as we move forward on where we partition things off and what we have to expend. But it's the cost of doing business today.
Vince, hey, it's Jody Dunley with Cardinal Authority. I know you can't talk, specifics as far as, testing and all that kind of stuff. But when we talked to you last time, you said you knew there were going to be some bumps in the road. Have you guys seen some bumps, and how have you kind of dealt with that over the first couple of weeks with athletes on campus?
No real bumps. What we're dealing with, Jody, is refining our process and refining it. Like, what do we learn from when they did the drive-through testing? What do we do on, the turnaround times? Cleaning, I think we're looking at that, how the student athletes are performing in that area and how they're adjusting, food, drinks, all those things we're thinking about. Should we be doing it differently or better? So that was the whole notion of having the original phase one is just so, trial and error. And but it's gone extremely well, is all I can say. I mean, it's really gone well. Our staff did an amazing amount of planning. The third parties we engaged with have really been helpful. So, hopefully we see the same thing as we roll out the additional phases over the summer.
A follow up on that. In the meeting this morning, I noticed it said phase 2 when Pat was given that. It said men's soccer, women's soccer, volleyball, and field hockey. Is that the entire teams coming back, or only a portion of those teams coming back in phase 2?
Yeah, there's portions of teams that are coming back as we go through this. Similar overall quantity, similar to what we did in phase 1, and so that we're taking this off in bite sizes that we can handle. As we keep doing the additional phases. As the roster sizes vary by sport. So, when you say 15, that may cover a whole sport. Certainly tennis and golf are well below those, but you get into other sports, you got larger roster size, particularly somebody like rowing that's significant.
Vince, Eric Crawford, WDRB. Last time we talked, you kind of went into all these variables on the football question. Some schools being in one situation in their state, different COVID situations in the states, all the moving parts. Just wondered if you have any better clarity right now than even you did maybe a couple of weeks ago as to how all this will work, timeline of decisions and things like that.
We don't, Eric, and that's the, I've said this before, not having a real college football czar, you're really taking leads from different areas. We're certainly talking about it a lot in our own conference. I think the Autonomy 5 commissioners are speaking almost daily, if not daily. And I think a lot's bubbling out of those discussions because we're sharing so much. As I say, there's no competition in getting started. We're all in it equally and wanting to get started, but wanting to do it safely. So we're sharing a lot of our safety measures, but it still feels like there's no pressure on naming the date. I think they're really focused on when to start practice as much as when, and that will probably lead to when that first game actually comes. But we got to be prepared for detours along the way. We may say, hey, we're going to start on whatever date in July, and then if there was a big rise in cases, then it may change things. But the thing we're dealing with is fortunate. These are really healthy individuals. I mean, I envy to be as that age and that healthy right now. I mean, they're just so you're just not seeing that. I think you can look at the state of Kentucky, how many cases versus how many deaths in that age group, and there's zeros in some of these categories that represent our age group, the ones we're dealing with. So with that being said, you really focus on your staff and making sure they're comfortable and they're healthy. And I think that's what our student athletes, when we talk to them and get feedback from them, that's the thing they want to make sure is the people around them and the staff are getting tested and they're as healthy as they are to keep them safe.
In terms of fans, Vince, how closely might you watch something like Churchill Downs' proposal, which is supposed to go to the state in a couple of days, and what the state does with an event like that, which starts right around when your season might?
Yeah, very closely. I know that, I've been fortunate that, Bill Mudd's a personal friend, certainly know Bill Karstantian, but, very intrigued by what they're doing and their approach. We've got similar traits. We've got, call it general mission, but lower bowl. And then we certainly have premium areas and different ones, much like they would have Turf Club or Millionaires Row or other areas, and certainly boxes. Which would be like our premium seats in the loge area. So we're watching what they're doing very closely, but we're also watching other sports and how they're handling things. And we're intrigued to see how all the pro sports are doing it. It's the benefit we have right now with all the pro leagues kind of out front. As I mentioned before, we have two of our member schools, Pittsburgh and Miami, that play in NFL stadiums, and that they certainly provide some nice guidance to the league.
Vince Russ again. Is there any update on the possibility of moving the opener to Wednesday night?
Not yet. That requires, conference blessing as much as North Carolina State and ourselves, but conference blessing, and the football oversight committee would have to bless that as well. Much like you see teams move any schedules around, it would go through them. But we would expect, we're not pressed on that date or that answer. We'll adjust either way, but I just think we want optionality for obvious reasons.
All right.
Vince, this is Aaron again with WDRB. This is obviously not something that affects the masses, but I guess just from our standpoint, has there been any conversation about what to do football season wise with the press box, press conferences post game, and even number of people allowed on the field?
Yeah, we're going to put everybody in a stable together. We think it'll limit future questions going forward. No, I mean, it's the same thing, Aaron. I mean, honestly, that is an issue. As you guys know, we're fortunate to have more space than most, not just at the football stadium, but the arena. But we have been talking about that on how we would have to spread people out. You're seeing this with the NBA, what they're doing right now. I'm watching what they're doing with the media. And I think those are good indicators of what others will be doing as well. So, as we talk, as I mentioned this, and I'm watching how we got to handle, we need you guys there too, as much as we need our fans. We want that coverage and support. It's very important to our programs to have you guys there. So I think we're trying to think about how would we have spacing? Are there other areas that we need to use? Whether if there's any suites that we sell on a game by game basis, do we need to redeploy those for either bringing loge customers that we're thinking about that we could hold up, try to figure out how we deal with this situation. But the media's got to be taken into account as much as the facility staff.
And we've had many discussions on the conference level and national level as well on that as well. But again, there's a lot of variables out there at the moment.
I think we're going to require bodysuits of all media.
Any other questions for Vince today?
Yeah, Vince Cameron from Courier Journal again. Kind of going back to the budget. When you guys are starting putting this together, and you saw that operating revenue budget around 95 million. Just was that something that scares you a little bit, or was that something that you kind of expected and you thought you guys could handle at the moment?
No, well, it didn't scare me. You got to deal with what's in front of you. And we took all that we knew at that time and tried to apply it, on that. And, look, it's not easy when you're investing in a variety of things. You have some key initiatives going on in your department. You love to continue to support it, but it just doesn't allow it. It's just not fiscally responsible. So we've had to pull back. And, whether it be furloughs, which, there's not many that doesn't understand the definition of that word these days. Whether it's furloughs or whether it's comp reductions, we knew we were going to have to hit every area. And I think we knew if things don't go perfectly, even on that budget, which I don't expect, there'll be variability up or down, that we may have to make further moves. But as you can imagine, the initiative was try to protect the student athlete experience as best we can. That's why we're here. And if we have to give up other things or modify, whether it be travel or perks, retirement benefits, whatever it might be, to keep things moving forward on behalf of our student athletes. So I think everybody was committed to doing that.
Vince, hey, it's Jody again. There's been some talk out there nationally about the NCAA saying maybe July 15th or August 1st or August 15th for when basketball, the coaches can actually get with the student athletes. What do you know about that, and what do you think is needs to be done as far as like moving forward for basketball, and when coaches can get with their athletes?
Well, here's what I will tell you that I pushed hard on this yesterday in our ACC AD meeting, is that they talk to our student athletes. And, I think Mary and Paul, who lead our women's and men's basketball on behalf of the ACC, were responsive to that. They actually appreciated the request. We've done that in football. So every school sent in a couple names of student athletes for their respective schools to let them ask questions. So they had a student athlete's point of view as much as ours, and that they could take that to the basketball oversight committees and give them a view of not only their own and the schools, but obviously student athlete thoughts, concerns, what it may be. Because I think there is a concern that, the student athletes come onto campus now. They allow men's and women's basketball to come on now in June 1. And then are they going to do 2 months of voluntary workouts to get to August 1, or should it be a July 1 or July 15th? You've seen head coaches come out and push for the earlier dates that I mentioned. I think we'd be in favor of that as well, to move it up, move things forward if they're going to be here on campus. And once their voluntary conditioning kind of runs its course here, I'd certainly love to see them in early July. I know Coach Mack would too, and Coach Walls would too, that let's get some instruction going and think about what's the right number of countable hours towards that. They're going to hear a lot more about it because they have their meetings on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they'll be more talked about as we roll through early next week.
Hey, it's Aaron again. Just wondering, as a former pitcher, have you done any what could have beens over the last couple of days, now knowing that you had 2 first-round draft picks in the starting rotation this year?
Yeah, I will tell you, it's there was a reason why we were preseason number 1, and I think those 2 guys played a big role in that too. They would have been tough to beat. And thinking about Luke Smith and my gosh, Adam Elliott, Michael Kirian, just the depth that we had in pitching. As you guys know, when you get into these regional and super regionals, win 2 out of 3, we were going to be tough to beat. Certainly no guarantees. We've seen things happen with really great teams here, but we would have been odds-on favorite to get back to Omaha. And the way we were hitting and scoring runs when the COVID hit, that's the thing that was really exciting about our opportunity to not only go back to Omaha, but take it a step further and compete for a national championship, and hopefully bring home that trophy.
Any other questions for Vince today? Well, thank you, everyone. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us, Vince.
Thank you.